Hi everybody, welcome back. We're going to wrap up chapter 18 talking about long-term financing. As your company grows, you're going to realize that the short-term costs are pretty much baked in. You pretty much know what you need to pay for payroll, utilities, rent, etc. Your historic capital investments, again, have already been sort of baked into the balance sheet. So now you're looking out over the future, and this is part of your strategic equals long-term planning process. Now, this is where the complexity comes in for many companies. Now, with Coca-Cola, for example, the poster child of being Kathy Waller of Coke, you've got the issue of we've got so many products in so many countries. What are the sales projections for each of these products? How has COVID impacted these sales projections? How do we expect the sales projections to change over the next, several years, or at least the next 3 years, because that's kind of really the sweet spot of strategic budgeting. With COVID, maybe people are sitting home drinking more Coca-Cola, maybe less. But these are things you need to identify. Okay, what's the trend with our products? Which ones are good? Which ones are tailing off? Which products we're going to introduce in the next 3 years? And how do we budget accordingly for that? So, and where do we go to get the funding? By the way, before I go down that path, I mentioned Disneyland. I checked to see what the ticket status was with Disneyland, because they said they're reopening. Kids are just stir crazy. And what I read online today was that they're only selling tickets online. The first weekend's completely gone. And they said that people are on hold online. They're on hold for 8 hours to try to get Disney tickets. Ouch. And I've been there. Every time family, when I lived in Southern California, I never went there of my own volition. It was always somebody coming and wanting to go to Disneyland. And I would recommend going there once. It's got its charms, and everybody's nice. It's the Disney way. They really everybody goes through the Disney charm school, I guess. So they're really pretty friendly and extremely helpful people who work there, which is kind of nice. One part of the world you can go where you're going to see happy, friendly faces everywhere you turn. So that's kind of nice. That's worth the price of admission in my book. So back to financing. So now, like I say, short term, you kind of know what your costs are going to be. Long term, you have to decide. That's going to be based on all the variables of your business. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? Are we doing new product rollouts? All of those things. Now, for most companies, the sad trend over the past several years has been, past 4 especially, interest rates have been so low that companies have kind of gorged on debt. And that may be okay, it may not. In other words, if that debt is going towards productive investment, then that's a good thing, okay? If you can borrow money at next to nothing, the lowest interest rate, which is what the federal government, loans its biggest customers, so to speak, is, I think, 0.25% right now. So, which is like the lowest in history. It's never been negative yet. Holding my breath on that. Sub-Zero used to be a brand of refrigerator when I moved west, but now it's like a global interest rate policy, unfortunately. So the federal government is lending money to these companies at extremely low rates, and they're gorging on this debt. Now, of course, it's got to be paid back. So if the economy keeps humming along and businesses keep expanding and people have more discretionary income to spend, then that's a productive use of funds. That's a productive use of capital. The danger comes if things do slow down and then the companies are on the hook with a lot of debt and how do you pay it back, that type of thing. So let's go into where do you get the money from. Okay, clearly companies can go to banks. Commercial banks typically are business-to-business lenders. I mean, they focus on the business marketplace. They don't really deal with, they don't do home mortgages or car loans or things like that. They do business lending. You can also issue bonds. The name's bond. Bonds, we talked about this in an earlier chapter. See, this is where things start to tie multiple chapters together. The 3 chapters when we talked about stocks and bonds and starting up a business. Now the business has started and it's grown, so now we need more financing. So bonds are raising money through debt. And again, I'm going to bust out my little friend here. This will be a typical bond offering. Just to sort of, if you see this in the financial section of the newspaper, the business section, I want you to know what it is. This is a bond issued by IBM Corporation, and it pays an interest rate of 3.625% that's due on February 12th, 2024. Okay, so the benefit to the bondholder is they'll get a higher rate of return than they would in a savings bank. I mean, if you went out and bought an IBM bond that paid 3 and change, that's pretty good. I mean, a checking account isn't going to pay you anything. A savings account is likely going to pay you less than 1%. I mean, just for laughs, go to whatever bank you go to or credit union, see how much they pay on savings. In most cases, it's less than 1%. Or they'll have a teaser rate that's good for 6 months. Come to our bank, we'll give you 3%. Yeah, they read the fine print. It drops from 3% to a quarter point after 6 months, type of thing. But they've got your money, so that's the whole goal. So bonds are one way of raising funds. Now, a company like IBM, for example, they're a AAA rated company because they've never defaulted on a bond. I mean, if you purchase an IBM bond, so far historically, your money's been rock solid. I mean, when the bond comes due on February 12th, 2024, you're going to receive your payment. Your principal that you paid, let's say you bought a $1,000 bond or put $1,000 into these IBM bonds, you'll receive that money back plus 3.625% interest. So again, much better than you could do in a savings account. And where companies again, responsible companies get AAA ratings, which means that their bonds will go on sale at a lower interest rate. Other companies, you may say, well, wow, there's some other companies out there that are paying 5% on their bonds. Well, there's a reason for that. They're not as financially stable, okay? So Wall Street doesn't give anything away for free. If you're a financially stable company, you get to benefit from issuing bonds at the lowest possible interest rate. If there's any shakiness to your balance sheet or a chance you might default, that interest rate correspondingly goes up. It's just like you and I with a credit card. If they think we're a safe person to lend to, then the interest rate will be reasonably low. It's going to be clearly a hell of a lot higher than what companies get. But that's unsecured debt. There's nothing behind it. But with the corporations, rates are going to vary based on the rating of the bond. AAA is the best. CCC is the worst. Okay, that's what's called a junk bond. And if our bond is CCC, that's saying, okay, well, this company may not be around to pay this bond off. In other words, if it's a 6% bond due in 2026, if it's CCC rated, then that's saying, well, maybe in 2026 this company won't be here. Now, the other alternative is stocks. Stock is you're giving up ownership shares. Okay, so you're selling off a portion of the ownership when you do a stock offering and sell additional shares of stock. You're giving up a stake of the ownership of the company. And that raises money, so there's trade-offs there. We talked about one of the negatives of owning a stock. I'll go with the negative first. The negative of owning a stock is that you have to pay double taxation. If the company makes a profit, they're taxed on the profit, and then you sell the stock, you're taxed on the profit you made on the stock. Okay. Same holds true if the company loses money. If they lose money, that's a tax deduction, and if your shares of your stock go down and you decide to sell, then that's a tax deduction for you too. So it does work both ways. The thing also to be aware of with financing is bondholders get paid first. Okay, if the company goes into the tank and everybody's lining up to collect or get what they pluck what meat off the carcass that they can, the bondholders are first in line for repayment. It may be a case if the company truly goes totally bust, the shareholders are left with nothing. They're holding the bag. An example of that is Toys R Us. Toys R Us got very heavily loaded up with debt. And debt, by the way, is also referred to as leverage. So Warren Buffett's one of the richest investors in America. His second in command is a fellow by the name of Charlie Munger. And Charlie Munger said, there's three ways to go broke in this world: lovers, liquor, and leverage. Companies that leverage up too much, gorge on too much cheap debt, and then can't pay it back. They are financially bad bets. And, as I say, Wall Street doesn't do it for free, or they don't do it out of the kindness of their hearts. If something goes wrong, the shareholders are going to be left holding the bag. Okay, whatever table scraps are left from the company, that goes to the bondholders. So just be aware of that. And so that's really kind of it. Just trying to think if there's any other. Yeah, the rest of the chapter talks about debt financing, which is issuing bonds, stock issuance, which is selling ownership, and then it compares the two. And then it also talks about the financial recession, the Great Recession of 2008, which we still bear the scars of to some extent. But I don't think too many lessons got learned. In 2008, it was really the housing market that collapsed. Housing prices just kept getting bid up and bid up and bid up. And a little bit like today, unfortunately. I think the thing is, mortgage rates are so cheap, people are saying, well, gosh, look, housing prices are rising, interest rates are really low. Why don't we get into the housing market? Well, it may be good. I mean, it may continue to go up. I mean, don't underestimate how much momentum can continue to carry things up. So this housing market may go on for weeks or years, going on its same trajectory. But also remember, I mean, trees don't grow to the sky, right? I mean, nothing just continues to rise and rise and rise. So interest rates being low, and that is facilitating a lot of borrowing by corporations and individuals. So something to be aware of down the road. And so the Great Recession, just real quickly there, people got too extended in the housing markets, and companies got too extended on their borrowing, which eventually the cycle reversed itself. The debt came due, business slowed down a little bit, companies couldn't pay the debt back, and so companies laid off workers, couldn't make the mortgage payments. They had their houses foreclosed on, banks lost money, they laid people off, so on and so on and so on. So everything that stirred things up to the top were forces to cause a downward spiral in 2008. And of course the government came to the rescue, but it's sort of like those movies in the westerns where the cavalry rides to the top of the hill and saves the people at the top. Well, this time the cavalry went up to the top of the hill just in time to collect all the dead bodies. In other words, the government stepped in after all the damage had been done. So don't have a crystal ball. I wish I could tell you where things are going. But money is cheap. Debt is being used extensively, both by corporations and individuals. So there's some parallels to 2008. I sure hope it doesn't play out that way, but again, crystal ball is a little hazy. So see you on Zoom. Bring your questions.